So, welcome. This is a video to go through the sequence of learning. We're going to go through what you need to include in each of the boxes at the top here. And as we go through course characteristics, intent and rationale, maths, English, digital skills, digital wellbeing, safeguarding, employability, assessment, and vocation directed study. And we're also going to talk about what needs to be in these boxes here. So how to map from the criteria of your courses, the aims and objectives that you're going to need to show in your lesson, and how you're going to get your learners to finish those learning aims and objectives. So if we start at the top, Scott, do you want to run through kind of the stuff that needs to go through at the top there?
Yes, so at the very top, the course owner, it starts with the course owner, that responsibility. So the teacher is going to be the main assessor, the main figurehead for a particular course in the top right, faculty head, awarding body. All this information needs to be at the top in the boxes that are outlined. But you'll notice that some of the boxes underneath, for example, I can see on the left hand side there, apprenticeship standard, name and code. That's not relevant, like for me, for example. So you can delete certain rows if it isn't appropriate, or contact us and we can help you. Remember, this is for everyone to use. We've got everyone's sequences of learning in the same space. Not all of these boxes will always be immediately apparent as to what they're for, or whether they are for your course. Speak to us. IQA IV name, making sure that's on there as well. Industry placement coordinator, RAP, all this information needs to be there as a bare minimum. If you are delivering an apprenticeship standard, then as you can see, the purple line denotes where your section begins underneath. So it's either the top one or the bottom one that you'll be filling in, not both sections.
Thanks, Scott. I think that's really important to remember. We've had some confusion, I know, with staff members that can see that it doesn't map across to what they're delivering. So only fill in the sections that you know are going to be relevant to your students and your courses that you're teaching. So if you move down to course characteristics, so really it's who you're planning the learning for and what you're aiming for the learner to achieve. So if I'm reading this correctly, and Scott, you can jump in, I'd be talking about the age group that I'm teaching, who it is and the level, and then actually I'd probably be looking at the main learner outcomes from some of the specifications that you are teaching. So what is it that at the end of this learning journey that they're going to need to have achieved? What type of assessment are they going to need to have achieved as well? Yeah,
so in terms of, is it for university that you are training them for? Is it for apprenticeships? Is it for progression to another course perhaps? Who is the cohort? What are their characteristics? So a group profile can often inform this. And sometimes after that first week or so, you get a read on your group, if it's a new course that is, and start to really get a sense of who they are and what you are trying to aim them towards. But in truth, we've got a good idea about our courses, our standards, our qualifications, and we know where we are directing them. So it's really important that we state very clearly where we are aiming our learners, what we want them to achieve in this box here. And again, we're always available to help you with this if you're stuck.
So moving on to the intent and rationale. So we're looking at knowledge, skills and behaviours. This is a term that is very common in apprenticeships in particular. They are very versed in using knowledge, skills and behaviours, but might be something that's slightly less easy to understand if we're teaching level 3 learners in particular. So what you want to think about is looking at your course or the unit that you're delivering. What knowledge do you want your learners to have developed during the period of delivery? So what do they want to do at the end of that unit or course? What do you want them to tell you that they have learnt? What knowledge have they gained? The skills, so how are you getting them to that knowledge? How are you leading them towards that end goal? What skills do you want them to look at? When we think of things like communication skills, we often use soft and hard skills. You know your subject areas, so you know which skills learners are going to need to have achieved. And behaviours, so what have you planned? Why have you planned the way that you have? And the general behaviour of the students as well. So has that improved over the time they've done the course? Is it in line with what should be happening when they finish and they progress onto their courses outside of college? So really a couple, 2 or 3 sentences, I would say probably on each, just as a general overview of what it is. So think about this document, you're giving it to someone that has no idea about your course. When they pick this up, they should have an idea of why you've planned the course the way that you have. Maths, English and digital skills. So how will you embed maths and English throughout your planning? I know historically with maths and English, it was a key indicator really for Ofsted and when you were doing lesson observations. So I want to reiterate that maths, English and digital skills should be embedded into the curriculum holistically and when they organically happen. So it doesn't have to be that you have to tick this maths and English box. You can highlight some activities that you do that tick some of those, that's absolutely fine, and we would encourage that, but it doesn't have to be shoehorned into every lesson. So thinking of the unit or the course as a whole, what maths, English and digital skills are you going to get your learners to be improving and learning? With
maths in particular, one that's immediately transferable is that of time management, of using their time, their calendar, their to-do list, when a deadline is looming, how are they going to use their time? So straight out the gate, we can all use that as a way to embed maths in what we do. In terms of English, no doubt there's a glossary or a terminology list. We can make one for you, self-marking quizzes and games in relation to that. That's something that straight away maths and English can be embedded in our courses, but of course there's more nuanced approaches. In relation to digital, that's baked and embedded into all we do. It's not a separate thing, it is part of the way we work, preparing people for expectations of their industry in the future. If you want help with some ideas as to how you can continue to increase uses of digital in a meaningful, relevant way that are led by the pedagogy, led by your expertise, always that way around, then get in touch and we can work with you to actually help you enhance that. But we do that really well as a college. We've got a signpost, it states it.
We absolutely do, and again, I echo exactly what Scott says. It's really about using it mindfully, so not shoehorning it in every opportunity that you think you need to or you have to. You don't. It's what works organically within the lessons that you've planned. We're then moving on to having a look at safeguarding, prevent British values, equality and diversity, and this echoes very much the same with maths, English, digital skills. It does not have to be shoehorned into every lesson, but a general awareness within your curriculum of where you might have opportunities to deliver this. So thinking about, health and social care, for example, you might be looking at case studies in a care home. That could be a great example of safeguarding. So how can you thread that through your curriculum? And just think about that as a whole. Again, your subject areas. You'll know there might be certain units or pieces of work that they need to complete, learners need to complete, that might fit well within safeguarding, prevent equality, diversity and racial justice.
With safeguarding in particular, we've got so many courses and so many lessons we've seen whereby the teacher's providing this safe, creative space to be vulnerable, to learn, to be open, and without maybe stating it in the sequence of learning, they are providing these opportunities for learners, which I think would be worthy of a mention in the sequence of learning. Actually, you're providing that opportunity and promoting and role modelling these behaviours of helping each other and being kind, compassionate. And I think that I'd mention that.
Absolutely. Employability and transferable skills. So which employers are on your employer board? Key opportunities to develop employability, transferable skills for learners' future careers, and skills employers are looking for in their future workforce. So this links in beautifully to their career progression. Why have they chosen the course that they are doing, and how are we preparing learners for when they finish this course, when they move on to the next part of their lives? So employers that you might talk to, you may have emailed, that you have good links with, any employers that you've had any links with need to be on this sequence of learning. Key opportunities to develop employability, transferable skills. Can you look and see what skills are going to be within the career progression for learners, and are you mapping that in your sequence of learning? And actually, what are they looking for in their future workforce? Scott and I mentioned the World Economic Forum top skills 2025 quite a lot. So can you see any of those, and do they fit organically within the sequence of learning within your curriculum that you're planning?
Guest speakers as well. Guest speakers, that they're worthy of being added here as well. And the last point there, skills employers are looking for in their future workforce. If you want any local employer data that can help inform and enrich your courses, then the Learning Hub team and the Teaching and Learning team, we're working together to actually gather that for you, to have it inform what you do, to have data sets to actually enrich your assignments as well. And also, how powerful is that when you're talking to students about the opportunities that are around, the trends in their sector? So we can help you with that. So please delegate to us, request that we get that data for you, and we will.
Moving on to having a look at assessment, and this is one of the key things that I'll be looking at when I go into observations, is how much assessment is happening in the lesson. So at the end of the lesson, how do you know that learners have learned something? Can they tell you what they have learned? So that's really, really important. And I think sometimes within schemes of learning and sequences of learning and lesson plans, we are not as explicit as we could be with assessment. So again, put the hat on of, you're giving this to someone that has no idea about your subject, no idea about your lessons. How are you going to show that you are assessing for learning throughout your planning? So you can have written knowledge, observations, reflective accounts, video with annotation, witness testimonies. There are so many ways to gather this assessment, both formatively and summatively. So if you think there's a new way that you want to assess within your course, come and speak to us. We can organise, especially around some of the digital tools that we have, ways to streamline your assessment. We've looked at using some of the whiteboards and things in the launch space, which has been really good. So please come and see us. That would be a really great opportunity to try and streamline that for you.
Voice feedback,
yeah.
Podcasts, something we're going to be showing more and more as the year goes on, but also peer questioning and feedback as well. Structured document handouts that are scaffolded with spaces for that assessment feedback. All these different opportunities, you're doing it no doubt, but to state it in the sequence of learning would be really useful as well. And of course we can come in and help you in your lessons with identifying these opportunities for naturally occurring formative checks, milestone little moments of reflection on the learning journey.
Vocation directed study. So it's 1 hour per week, and really it's a chance for you to be able to help develop your learners. So this can be research-based, planning, assignment work, project work. Just be explicit in what you want learners to do in those sessions and give them some sort of scaffolding of what they need to do. It then becomes quite difficult if we don't put that in place for learners to stay motivated and for them to actually complete something meaningful in those sessions. So where you can, try and think about something they have to feed back to you or write to you or something, so you're seeing that they're actually doing something, because that directed study time is really important, particularly for vocational courses in assignment completion.
Yeah, and what the stakes attached to it. Has it got criteria? Is it helping with IP? Is it helping with PD? Is it helping them get to where they need to be on their dashboard? Are there tangible outcomes as a consequence of this? This is a great opportunity to have one-to-ones in the pastoral bit of the job that we value so much, but it's setting them on a task to create evidence, video, audio, image, a site, a document, and you to have the one-to-ones with learners or in small groups. It's ideal. So vocationally directed study, does it sequence and follow on from previous learning, or does it follow into something else? Are they working on gathering evidence for an assignment deadline that's coming? It's a great opportunity to set them off on a task while you are free to come and have one-to-ones with each learner.
It's a great chance to retrieve or practice of information too during that time, so that's a really good chance to do that as well. We'll move on to having a look at kind of the main part of the sequence of learning now. So this is the part that some people have found a little bit confusing in terms of what you need to put in each section. So I had a conversation with Scott the other day, and I've done a little bit of training with travel and tourism and a little bit of sport, and we spoke about almost starting in reverse. So looking at the mapping, the impact, and then the intent, objectives and tasks. So when I went through this, I thought about kind of how I planned as a teacher and how I would still plan. And I would always start with the unit specification. I'm a BTech teacher, that's the first thing I'm going to look at, is actually what do they need to know. So that's where you start off with your mapping. So your criteria, your unit spec, anything in there that you think is particularly important, that's going to go in the mapping part. So you can say that actually in this lesson we are looking at P1. This is part of the assignment brief for the first assignment. This is what we're looking at. You can then think about the knowledge, skills and behaviours you want them to look at, how you're going to assess this, and key learning points. So really I like to think of that as your aims and objectives almost. So explicitly at the end of the lesson, what are they going to be able to tell you?
Yeah, that's good. I mean, the outcomes, absolutely, and it's the aim, isn't it? It's the overarching aim.
So at the end of that lesson, if I'm going to be teaching P1, which is probably in my subject area going to be anatomy, so probably to do with bones and the skeleton, I might say I want learners to be able to label an image of the skeleton, describe the different types of bones, and then maybe, if they had time, describe the bone growth process. So that'll be my aims and objectives. And then we're moving on to the next column. So we're looking at the intent, objectives and tasks. This needs to be a really clear journey of when the learners come into the room, what they're doing when they get in the room, and everything in between until they leave.
So we've taken away lesson plans now. In place of that, we want the beat by beat by beat flow in this left-hand column. This intention as to how you're going to get from each section to each section. And then this document reveals itself as a true sequence, a tapestry of what happens when, how it connects. And it's a living, breathing document whereby we can adjust and change things. I've already started to do it on my one in media. So this right-hand column, you're absolutely right, is where we should start in terms of criteria. And then going over to the left-hand side, which is our objectives, as it were.
So thinking about planning your lessons, when we're looking at the intent, objectives and tasks, we want to think about what learners are going to be doing when they come in. So be explicit in the starter activity they're doing. Be explicit in the main aim and objective. How are you going to get learners to take that information in? What activities are you doing with them? And importantly, how are you going to assess them? Try and be as explicit as possible. So avoid vague things like question and answer or just questioning. Like specifically, what are you going to ask? Do you know the questions you're going to pose?
So that was something that come up in like old lesson plans years back. I remember with copy and paste, and I would like Q&A, directed questioning,
assessment for learning, and it was like
but it didn't mean anything.
No.
Whereas what we want this column to be now is like specific, truthful, authentic, teaching and learning. What are you actually doing? What are they actually getting from it?
Think about plenary. So at the end of the lesson, you've gone through all the great activities. They're all student-centred. They're busy doing things at the plenary. That's where you want them to tell you what they have learned. When that learner is leaving the door, you know that when they've left, right, they've learned this. This is the information that they have. And if maybe they haven't grasped it, and that's happened to me many a time, you can then revisit it in the next lesson. You open up your sequence of learning, you update next lesson. It's a live document. Anything else you'd like to add, Scott?
Yeah, this middle column in particular, I'm finding that really useful as a way to check for myself. Like, what have they got from this? What's the impact been? So what do they need to get from my lesson in order to go forward to the next one? And I look at that this week I did, and I looked at it and I went, I was a bit ambitious there, and that went wrong, and I didn't quite communicate that well enough. And next Monday, at the time of recording, is the Queen's funeral, so I'm going to have to adjust things to week 3 it will be now. So that living, breathing adaptation, as Claire rightly says. But this column here of impact gives me a chance to state what they absolutely, as a bare minimum, have to take from my lesson and how I'm going to assess it. So I'm often using motes for voice feedback, one mote a week, just a little 30-second, a 40-50 second audio clip from me, just giving them feedback on what they've done so far, or peer questioning of each other's work, or perhaps I give them a quick question as they leave the classroom just to see what they took from the lesson. But a way to show that how I'm assessing what they've learned, what they've taken from it, is something this document has actually really helped me with. I'm more conscious about that check on learning.
And I just want to make a point here too with the little prompting questions in here. These are just prompting questions to get you thinking about what you need to include. Do not feel like you need to answer every single one of these questions. Again, if it's happening organically in your lessons, that's great, and highlight it, and we love to see that, but you don't have to answer every single thing. If you are copying and pasting over from previous schemes of work and those kind of things, really have a look at those lessons and see if they can be further improved or that you change anything, and just be explicit in that. Try and avoid just copying and pasting over and kind of putting it into the same columns, because sometimes it doesn't make sense. That's the really important thing. So have a read over once you've finished it and really look at it and think, can I give this to someone and they know exactly what's going on?
Absolutely. So in summary then, the mapping column, your criteria, essentially.
Absolutely.
And also, you might want to add in some more colour here. So, for example, I've been putting in knowledge, skills and behaviours such as communication skills, how to appear in an interview context, for example, is a recent knowledge, skills and behaviour example I've been really putting into my lessons. How to communicate professionally using digital tools is another skill I've been adding in there.
Yep.
So the mapping column, criteria, but also specific skills, but behaviour and knowledge as well. The intent, objectives and tasks column on the left, your tasks, objectives, specifically how are they going to progress through the lesson. And the impact column in the middle is what are they taking from it? What they absolutely, as a bare minimum, have to take from the lesson. And how are you going to check this? That's how I'm thinking of it.
Yep.
And that's working for me so far. But this is by no means prescriptive, in terms of it has to be exactly all these points. This is a guideline for you. And if you're stuck at any of these points, talk to us. We're there to help you.
Please do come and see us. Our door is always open. Bye.